Okay. Everyone would rise. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Peggy, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Beistel?
Here.
Mr. Carson?
Here.
Dr. Fike?
Here.
Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Here.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Christy Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Here.
For the record, Mrs. Love did reach out to Mrs. Rhodes, said she would not be present.
Backwards.
Correct.
Mrs. Rhodes reached out to Mrs. Love.
No, she did tell me. Mrs. Love did tell me.
But she's the one who wouldn't be present.
Yes, she's not present. So, Peggy, do we have any citizens' comments?
We are supposed to have one. Mr. Pushkar?
This is actually Candace Raymond.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to take a brief moment. I have 2 children in the district, one going to 2nd grade, one going to 6th grade. And I just wanted to make a few comments about the plans for reopening school in the fall. I have received and submitted all of the surveys that the school has sent out, and I've also seen a lot of criticisms floating around on social media. And I just wanted to state that not everybody is critical of the proposed plan doing alternating days. I certainly want my kids to be back in school 5 days a week. I think it's the absolute best thing for them educationally and socially, but I only want that to happen if it is safe for our students and for our teachers. And I believe for a number of reasons that the alternating day on the 6-day cycle plan is the best compromise and the best balance of both of those things, of safety and education. For one thing, I think it's the most consistent way to be with the teachers. It allows teachers to be with the kids one day and go over a lesson, explain what they're working on, and then be able to say, okay, tomorrow you're going to be at home. Here's what you need to work on that next day. And then when they come back to school the following day, to be able to follow up and say, okay, any questions from what we did? Okay, now we can move on. I feel like big, large gaps away from school for several days at a time just don't allow for the same consistency. And I think also that huge gaps away from school will require more instruction, for lack of a better word, or more assistance from parents at home because they will have spent several days away from their teacher. So I just think that it's the perfect balance of getting kids back to school, getting them the best educational situation, but still being safe in the process. I also know that recently the governor has ordered that everyone is to wear masks, and that would include children in school. But the order also specifically says that kids would be permitted to take masks off if they were seated at their desks and were socially distanced, spaced apart from each other. There's no way for that to happen, the being spaced apart, if everyone is at school all the time with full classrooms. The only way that that can happen is if we divide up the school population so that not everyone's there at the same time. So that kind of alleviates the people who are concerned about their kids wearing their masks all day long. If you're able to socially distance and not have everyone in school all at the same time, then kids can take their masks off, and it wouldn't be an all-day event. I think it would be a lot less of an issue for the kids if they're maybe just wearing them in the hallways or to certain places, but not necessarily literally wearing it the entire day. I definitely do not envy any of you. I know that this is a really difficult decision. Things are constantly changing. New information is coming out. Things are going backwards, forwards all the time, and I know that this is a very difficult decision. But I just wanted to say that, like I said, I've seen a lot of criticisms flying around on social media, and those criticisms have been very vocal, and I feel like sometimes the people who agree with what are happening are less vocal, but I just wanted to let you guys know that we are out there, and like I said, I would love my kids to be back in school full time. I think it's the best situation for them, but I also want them to be safe when they're at school. I want their teachers to be safe. I want everyone in our community to be safe, and I think the alternating day plan is the way to accomplish that. So I just appreciate your time, and thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have any additional comments, Peggy? No? All right, then. No other comments. We're going to move on. Minutes of the following
Madam
board
President,
meeting.
Madam
Yes.
President,
Oh, that's right.
please move to vote on adopting G1 first to
Okay. Right. I
with
forgot.
what meetings conducted.
Okay. Adoption of school meeting changes.
Whereas there have been declarations of emergency and closures of the schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by Westmoreland County being put into the green phase under the governor's plan at the beginning of June, followed by the school board having adopted a plan on June 25th, 2020 to resume physical presence meetings to begin July 9th, 2020, followed by increased concerns over a rising number of hospitalizations with continuing limitations on the size of in-person gatherings and the social spaces available for physical presence for public meetings being greatly limited by the need for social distancing as per CDC guidelines and the July 2020 order of Pennsylvania Secretary of Health requiring facial coverings and the difficulties attendant to hearing the members and each other. Whereas the board policy 003 and 006.1 would otherwise require attendance at public meetings by a quorum of the board of school directors being physically present, and changes any suspension of the rules or policy would otherwise be for only one meeting, and it is necessary to make means for board members and the public to participate remotely. Be it resolved that Board Policy 003, suspension of rules, changes in policy, and 006.1, attendance at meetings via electronic communications, are suspended in part to the extent inconsistent with the following. The school board hereby approves the notice of Southmoreland School Board meeting changes attached hereto and advertised for tonight's July 9th, 2020 meeting for the purposes for tonight's meeting only, but due to COVID-19 safety concerns and technological issues, except that it deletes any requirements of the members, officials, or public being physically present in the middle school cafeteria.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll
Heather
second.
Smith,
Second.
second.
Any kind of discussion on this?
By 6 affirmative votes.
Okay. All right, roll call, please. Michelle, did you have a comment?
No?
Oh, okay, I saw your square come up. I'm sorry. All right, that's okay. All right, Peggy, roll call, please.
Crystal,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
No.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
Okay. Dave, do we need to go to the number 2 part of that then?
No, you can catch that later.
Okay, so we can go back then to the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back to minutes. Minutes of the following board meeting.
Board is asked to approve the minutes. Boy, those are tongue twisters.
Was that, sorry, my screen froze, so I didn't, that's why I wasn't able to say. So are we ready to get a motion on the board, on the table now?
I
On
didn't
the
hear
floor,
anything either. Mr. Mash just, on my end, said nothing.
Oh,
Okay, do you want me to repeat?
Are we just approving the minutes?
Yes.
I think we know that. I don't think you need.
okay. I'll need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Need a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any negative comments? All right, that passes then. June 2020 check summary.
The board is asked to approve the June 2020 check summary.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion. Michelle Williams.
Second.
Heather Smith, second.
Any discussion on this? Roll call, please.
Mr. Carson,
Unmute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Fike,
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Board summary report.
The board is asked to approve the June 2020 General Fund Board Summary Report.
I need a motion.
Arsenal motion.
Second.
Williams, second.
Any discussion?
Does Mr. Marnell have any updates as to how we're going to come in for the rest of the year?
There is no update to give this evening.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Treasurer report.
The board will be asked to approve the May 2020 Treasurer Report.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion. I'll
I
second.
think I heard Mr. Beistel and Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any discussion on this?
You know, 12 and 14, they all say the same thing. They're huge numbers.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
You know what, Peggy? I asked a question, I didn't get an answer, so I'll have to pass.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 1 pass, 1 absent.
Access participation.
The board is asked to authorize Alex Novikov, the LEA, to participate in the SBAP by signature of its authorized representative below. It acknowledges that it will comply with all applicable state and federal statutes and regulations and policies which pertain to participation in the Pennsylvania Medical Assistance Program, and assign a representative of the LEA to participate in SBAP training designated as mandatory, and participate in the random moment time study, and submit compensable direct service claims and complete annual cost reconciliation cost settlements of direct service claiming.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion. Michelle Williams.
Second.
I'll second. Christy Smith.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
It says here the DHS will receive 25% of the documented and approved administrative costs. What's DHS? Is that the Department of Human Services?
Mr. Novikov, you there?
Yes, and yes, that is the Department of Human Services, Dr. Fike. That's their standard rate for everyone billing medical access.
That's what they charge us.
Yeah, the reimbursement rates end up being about half of what we actually bill for because of the cuts that DHS then the state ends up taking. So
You're kidding me.
no, it's not something negotiable district to district. That's a just flat situation that we have.
But we're the ones who are providing the services.
I agree, and they're not services that are optional either. So,
Right. This is shame. It's a shame they're doing this to us because we have every right to every penny.
Do we have any updates on how much money is in that account, Mr. Novikov?
So right now we don't have very much. We started billing in October in the first cycle. And we started just initially with some PCAs. We had to get reauthorized medical signatures for all 300 special education students because they hadn't been done before. And then we kind of ended in March. Some teletherapy was billable. We've only received back about $3,000, but there's a backlog that's pretty significant. And our billing representative at the IU has logged over 1,500 items. So as we increase the nurses next year, I do expect to see a significant growth. But right now, especially after the March shutdown, we've been in quite a holding pattern as far as waiting to receive any real funds. So right now, there's not a lot of really positive news from that, but we want to continue with the process because the potential is really significant. So we just started in October.
Thank you.
Alex, is this federal?
Yes.
Is this federal or is federal?
Federal, yes.
Any more discussion? Thank you, Alex. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Superintendent information.
If it's okay with the board, I will wait till a later agenda item to add some content.
Okay, that's fine. Business manager. Do you
I
have
have-
anything?
I have no specific items to add this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Solicitor information.
This relates to your upcoming item, which is the resolution to declare the Roughdale school property unused and unnecessary for school purposes, and to move forward with a sale to East Huntington Township. I had generated the proposed agreement of sale and the proposed resolution. I had sent out the agreement of sale, and I had a phone call today, and today was the actual first day in which both Solicitor Aaron Bylon had had an opportunity to meet and discuss with the supervisors, and having concrete documents in front of them. The substance has not changed. The item 1 is the legal description, and it goes through the descriptions for the 3 different parcels, including the access road that was acquired from the adjoining property owners. Within that, if you could call that up on your screen and go to page 4 of 14, are the restrictive covenants and conditions, which deal with the usages of the athletic fields to the rear, and that's A. B is the maintaining of the Veterans Memorial, and then C is wraparound language for both of those. Under A, you have in front of you the language which I have been utilizing for quite some time. The supervisors do not specifically object to the language, but I want to make you aware of different ways of viewing this that I wanted to make sure was brought back to you if there is concern about it. And that is that the language in A, under and subject to a covenant running with the ground in perpetuity for the grantee, its successors and assigns, that's the township, to provide for the benefit of the residents of Southmoreland School District. So that's all 4 political subdivisions. Its successors and assigns to restrict for public use the use of the athletic fields generally to the south of the building for recreation and athletic purposes by individuals and athletic leagues, and to provide for common ingress, egress, and regress access thereto and without discrimination, prohibited by law, including but not limited to race, religion, creed, sex, national origin, family status, or disability, all in perpetuity. The language does not say that it is, quote, exclusively for the benefit of the residents. And that is because the long usages of that field, although they have been by residents who are, go out there and use it, and in particular, the, I don't want to mess up the name, the Southmoreland Youth Recreation League, or Southmoreland Youth Athletic Association. I always mess up the name, I apologize. That league always has the potential for both resident children to be involved in it and children outside of the district. And obviously, it also has the potential for opposing teams to come in who are from totally different areas. So, I mean, that's, you know, if you're going to play sports, you have kids coming in from other areas. So I didn't think that was a major concern, but I wanted to make you aware of it, that kind of activity would go on into the future. Now, the township is planning to, once they acquire ownership, have rules as to, you know, how to conduct the property. And within that raises the possibility that there could be tournaments brought in that might not be residents either, especially as relates to that league and sponsoring tournaments for baseball games. That, I don't know if you find that objectionable for some reason, but I wanted to put that on the table. Now, as explained to me, it is intended by them that the residents of these 4 political subdivisions, which compose the Southmoreland School District, would have priority of use. And what it comes down to is, based upon the way that this has operated in the past and the expectation that there would be similar plus other usages there, you could leave the language alone as it is under A. If you don't feel comfortable with that, then the alternative would be to insert, and I tried to email this out today because it came up today, to insert into A so that it would read, for the benefit of the residents of Southmoreland School District, successors and assigns, who shall have priority of use, and then go on with the rest of the language. That was, you know, mentioned in the way they were describing the way they perceived this. And so I discussed that phrase with them as potentially including it within the agreement. And if you want to include that, as you feel that that would add greater protection for Southmoreland residents, then we have the opportunity to do that by inserting that language into subsection A on page 4 of the resolution, and again on page 9 of 14 for the actual agreement. Questions on that part before I go on?
Mr. Botonic,
Yes.
so are you saying that we sell them the property, but we want to put in the contract who we allow to play on that field? I mean, if we sell it, I mean, they can.
No. You approved a long time ago, I think it was back in January, that we were selling it subject to restrictive covenants as to the rear athletic fields, not the building, not the front yard, to continue the athletic and recreational usages for the public, and in particular for, you know, the benefits of the entire school district. And that has been part of this now, going back to when, actually before January, but it was officially, you know, brought into the resolution. I think it was passed in January to continue down the road with this process. So A, B, and C have been in there. The only question is, do we want to leave it as it is stated or to insert, and they're okay with that. They're okay either way, A, B, and C, or who shall have priority of use. The problem would arise if you somehow perceived this as being exclusively, that if you were from somewhere else on an opposing team or, you know, wanted to have a tournament or something, you couldn't use it at all. Those are the distinctions. Did I answer your question, or do you have a different question?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me which one we approve, as long as we approve something tonight. So,
agree.
And that is my hope, that we can get this done tonight, because then they can vote on this on later this month, the 23rd, I think.
My opinion would be approve whatever they want. Because this has been so long. And if we put that wording in there in January, that it's exclusive, I don't know that anybody on the board.
No. The exclusive word is not in here. I'm sorry. I'm still not getting this across. The word exclusive is not in the existing language.
Right, I don't think
And
we.
I think using it would upset the apple cart.
Mhm.
So as an alternative, either leave it alone or insert who shall have priority of use. You see the distinction?
Yes,
Mhm.
I say leave it alone. I
So
think it's
somebody
really
would-
get rid of this.
So
So
on one page you have priority, but on the other page it says exclusively. So we do not want the second page. Is that correct?
Right.
yes,
They're
and I
both
put that there in bright yellow to try to get
Yeah.
the message across about these distinctions. There are
Okay, so
three
that's the one
choices,
we don't
and one of
want.
them is
That's one we-
potentially a problem. Exclusive.
Priority, okay. We want
Yeah.
priority.
Well, there's a difference
I don't
between
know.
you board members. So whoever makes the motion is going to have to say as is, or inserting the phrase who shall have priority of use. Okay?
Well, I'd like to make the
So,
motion. in-
I'm not quite
phrase
done.
priority of use.
If I could finish.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
finish, David.
Okay, the sales by private sale to East Huntington Township. It's for $150,000. There's to be a down payment of $10,000. You're authorizing the president and the secretary then to execute the sales agreement upon public approval and presentation to you of the document. And upon both sides signing the agreement and receiving the down payment, then I would have to prepare a petition, and that would have to be executed. And we already have the appraisals from 2 new appraisers indicating that the $150,000 is more than could be expected at a public sale. And then I have to go and get into motions court, or maybe with consent of the township, do it without even having to schedule motions court, but get an order from the judge scheduling a hearing date, because it's subject to court approval, and there will be a hearing on this. That notice or that date then becomes part of a notice to go into the newspapers and the law journal. And it also has to be on handbills posted in 5 conspicuous places. And I've indicated that the superintendent should be designating someone to do that. There will be no reverter clause. So the township, or if they sell the property, its successors and assigns, it doesn't revert to the school district. However, the conditions, the restrictive covenants, if someone else were to buy it, still has to maintain the rear athletic fields for the usages of the athletic and recreational uses for the residents. Obviously, the advantage to this is that instead of relying upon a nonprofit corporation to maintain the ongoing vitality and policing and dealing with the property, the which is an entity that is more likely to have longevity, potentially in perpetuity, or to be taken over by another entity, which would still be subject to this. Whereas sometimes nonprofit corporations and these different associations go out of existence because they don't have enough members. The in the properties being sold as is, where is, with the things that are there, with the exception of some items of personality, which is the gas stoves. But otherwise, everything else that is there is going with the property. I'm sorry if I interrupted. I wanted to make sure that I covered everything. Does anyone want me to answer a question?
I have two questions. What did you say the sale price is?
$150,000, which is the number that was indicated as being acceptable in February.
And they get the lease. They get the lease for the rental property that they get the lease for the rental of it. They get the
Yes.
money.
Let's start, yeah.
It's prorated as of when you would do the closing.
So 3 years to sell a building that's appraised at $137,000. 3 years.
Any other questions for David?
I might add that this met your criteria for maintaining those rear lots for recreational usages and the price that you found acceptable.
Tonic.
Any other questions for David?
Yes, may I ask a
Christie?
question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
100% clear. You're saying leave it as is. That will upset the cart the least.
You could go with leave it as is, which is probably the easiest, cleanest. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that and you want to insert who shall have priority of use, they're not objecting to that.
Yeah.
And I
They're
don't
not-
think either one of those would have made a material difference, if any, to the appraisals.
Okay. Anyone else? Are you all done, David? Do you have anything else besides
Unless
this?
someone has a question, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. We're gonna move on to old business. Roughdale,
Dave, I'm turning this over to you because
Be resolved by the Board of School Directors of Southmoreland School District pursuant to authority granted to them by the Act of 1949, March 10, PL 30, Article 7, Section 707 as amended, that number 1, the following described land with former school building thereon formerly known as the Roughdale School Building are declared unused and unnecessary for school purposes and shall be sold. There are 3 tracts. They're described in writing and they are now public documents. Those 3 tracts consist of the first one having an area of 10 acres, which is more to the rear. The second one is where the current building is and essentially the front yard going to the front road. The deeds books describing those would be the same tracts being second and third in the indenture of East Huntington Township School District Authority to the Southmoreland School District, successor by jointure, dated April 1, 1978, in deed book volume 2282, page 535. They're under and subject to the rights of the public to that portion of the premises within State Route 31. They're under and subject to the rights of way and easements. A and B are then mentioned. I won't read them all, but it's Columbia Gas and Bell Telephone. Then accepting and reserving to the Southmoreland School Districts, its successors and assigns, the Veterans Memorial and the right for ingress, egress, and regress thereto for itself and the right for itself, its successors and assigns, and veterans organizations and the public, the right of access to the Veterans Memorial adjacent to State Route 31 on Memorial Day and Veterans Day each year for ceremony and remembrance, and at such times as reasonably necessary for Southmoreland School District, its successors and assigns, or designee to designate in writing a veterans or civic organization upon advance notice to maintain it, or relocated off the premises, all for a period not to exceed 20 years. It's my understanding that the township intends to maintain it and keep it, so as not to have to become involved in that. But nonetheless, to have rights of access to that, because that is in the front yard rather than the rear. They could also decide to move it to the rear. Track third then is the adjoining roadway that was acquired from the neighboring property owners, described in deeds in the being clauses on page 3. And then all 3 tracks are served by a private septic system. There's nothing that can be permitted to be constructed on that side right away. It's under and subject to rights of ingress, egress, and regress, if any, of other owners of lots in the unrecorded plan of lots of Samuel Boyer over track third. It's under and subject to the rights of the public in Route 31 and to a very old oil and gas lease to Summit Oil and Gas dated August 20th, 1930, for which there was never a surrender recorded. It's under and subject to the restrictive covenants, which we have been talking about. A, being for the usages to the rear for athletic and recreational purposes and without discrimination. Under and subject to a covenant running with the ground in perpetuity for the Veterans Memorial. The grantee could relocate it at its cost and expense to another location on the property. C is then that these covenants are running with the land, and that in any deed of conveyance or plan of subdivision thereof of said premises or any part thereof to any entity, person, or persons, said restrictions and conditions shall be incorporated by reference to this deed, and the record hereof or as fully as the same are contained herein, and the original grantee acknowledges that grantor has not required a reverter clause for this transfer in consideration thereof. It'll contain the standard red coal clause required in all the bituminous coal mining counties in Southwest Pennsylvania. Together with all singularly the easements and appurtenances whatsoever thereunto appertaining. The sale will be by private sale to East Huntington Township. Number 2. Number 3, the terms of the sale are as follows. According to the terms of the agreement of sale between Southmoreland School District and East Huntington Township, for cash sale of $150,000 with $10,000 deposit and balance due at closing. The number 4, the president and secretary of the board of school directors of Southmoreland School District are authorized and directed to execute the sales agreement upon the public approval of the school board and no greater than 5 days thereafter upon completion of the herein below requirements and obtaining final court approval. The solicitor is authorized and directed to prepare the necessary deed for closing and to deliver the same to the transferee at closing for the purchase price. Number 5, upon complete execution of the agreement of sale, the solicitor is authorized and directed to prepare and the secretary execute the petition for court approval pursuant to section 707.3 of the School Code of 1949 as amended, 24 PS 7-707.3. For that hearing, I would expect needing the services of most likely Mrs. Tarzan as the secretary to authenticate the records, and perhaps Mrs. Rhodes as the president if testimonies were needed. Number 6, notice the pending sale and the court hearing for approval of pending sale shall be given once a week for 3 consecutive weeks in the Daily Courier, the Greensburg Tribune Review, and the Westmoreland Law Journal. Notice of the pending sale and hearing for the approval of pending sale will also be given by posting of handbills, at least one or more of which must be posted upon the property to be sold and in at least 5 conspicuous places within the vicinity of the real estate. The working supervisor of buildings and grounds or such person as the superintendent shall designate in writing, will supervise their placement, take photographs thereof, and execute an affidavit as to the dates, times, and places of postings. We've done that in the past for the former administration building. Number 8, the secretary is authorized and directed to advertise legal notices to be prepared by the solicitor and business manager to pay therefore and the prothonotari's filing fee from the funds of the districts and to pay the costs. So someone making the motion should indicate whether or not they are inserting in the first restrictive covenant A, the phrase in the third line after the word assigns and before the words to restrict for public use, who shall have priority of use, or going with it as stated in the draft that is online. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We need a motion.
Carson, make a motion.
Is it to insert or not insert the phrase?
To not insert the phrase.
I will second that. Michelle Williams.
Any discussion on this?
We have background noise.
You know, I'd like to ask one question.
Sure, go ahead.
Is the township paying all the closing costs too?
The closing costs in the agreement are splitting a closing fee not to exceed $300, which is a traditional thing to do. There are, if they want survey, title search, title insurance, and recording fees, those are their expenses. There should not be transfer tax on this transfer because it is between two political subdivisions. If there would be, they would need to be split. But both the solicitor for the township and I think that both parties are exempt, such that even though this is a sale, that it doesn't matter. Unlike selling it to a private individual where tax would need to be paid and it would have to be borne by the private individual. So what you're talking about is, I mean, those are the costs. So that's who's paying what. Our fees, our costs are the filing fee and the advertising fees.
Which is where you don't
to get
really...
the court approval, which I don't have numbers for.
Okay.
The filing fee is approximately probably about $150 to file a petition. The advertising fees are harder to estimate.
Yeah.
But you are going to have several hundreds of dollars involved in advertising fees.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments for David or generally? All right, seeing none, let's move on to roll call, please.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Unmute.
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith, Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Okay, now we'll go to plan for new meeting changes going forward.
You must choose either A or B. Plan A, motion to suspend the rules and to adopt board policy to hold public meetings of the school board and officials by Zoom with YouTube and phone in by public and also written participation by public for all subsequent public meetings. Be it resolved that board policy 003, suspension of rule changes to policy 006.1, attendance at meetings via electronic communication are suspended in part to the extent inconsistent with the following. Number one, there shall be no requirement that board members, superintendent, administration, solicitor, or the public be physically present for a public meeting and voting by members or all the above. The minimum requirements going forward shall be that the members and the public may, at a minimum, hear all the members and all of the public commenters and know how board members individually voted in matters requiring a poll vote and be able to hear and or observe a voice vote, and members can speak to all the participating members present in the meeting contemporaneously and to the public viewing and hearing electronically or by telephone in real time and otherwise compliant with the Supreme Court's decision in Babbitt versus Milk Market Board in the current Sunshine Act 65 PA CS 701 et sec. Number two, specifically, the plan shall be until further notice that the school board, school officials, and solicitor will access the meeting and participate by the Zoom video and audio platform without the need of physical presence at the school building, except for the superintendent and those members lacking adequate or any internet access who shall be physically present at Southmoreland Middle School by participating by Zoom video and audio, and all without the physical presence of the public, and public access will be by both YouTube as described below or telephone as described below. Number three, public participation by oral comment will only be by the following method. A, by public access, but public access will be either by, but public access will be either by your individual telephone or telephoning the board secretary in advance at 724-317-5631 during the following times on a business day before the meeting between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. or on the day of the meeting between the hours of 1 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. and supplying your name, address, and telephone number, which will be using for the meeting in order to obtain the meeting ID and access information for live audio only, and the relevant information in C below, or B, by your computer, iPad, or iPhone or other electronic device to access through live streaming on YouTube for audio and video. Go to https://youtube.com/user./Southmoreland schools. Click meeting time, click on the word uploads, then change uploads to live streams, and you should see the meeting appear. C, public participation may also be by written comment of 500 words or less, also relevant under the open meeting law, and should reference the name and residence for the resident or the name, address, and local taxpayer status for a local taxpayer of the Southmoreland School District, or the name and contact information in category of public commenter pursuant to policy 903 if an employee, student, contracting party of the school district, or other person or entity covered by policy 903 phone contact information welcomed by the following means, done so to arrive no later than 6:30 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Number one, by email to Margaret Tarzan, Board Secretary at tarzanp@southmoreland.net. Number two, by U.S. Postal Services to the following address. Attention, written comment, Margaret Tarzan, Board Secretary, 200 Scotty Way, Scottsdale, PA 15683. Obtain more information at Southmoreland School District website in advance and for agenda. Or,
If I may, you may not have to read B if A passes. May I speak, Madam
Sure,
President?
go right ahead, David, please. Mr. Patani, go ahead.
A is meant to cover what you are doing tonight, which is meeting by Zoom without having to be physically present on the stage at the cafeteria middle school. The June 25th meeting, I believe is recognized by the board as having had technology issues with the situation of people trying to phone in and then being adequately captured so that the board members could hear and the public could hear. And it also created problems with spacing for the board members, wearing masks, making it harder to hear, and those sorts of things, and various other issues. So Plan A, if it is approved, is what you are doing tonight. You are hereby on Zoom, but without having to be in the middle school cafeteria. And I think tonight, for myself at least, I can't speak for everyone, we could hear the speaker very well, the public comment.
Yes.
Which was not the case at the previous meeting.
Yeah.
And Mr. Pushkar has sent, and I included in a documentation out to you, that trying to have too many technology platforms on top of each other, it was not technologically practicable as an ongoing guaranteed method of cleanly communicating. I mean, there are obviously still some issues with computers and voice changes, but that is better than totally, missing people, I guess is the way I would want to say that. It does provide for written comment, which is a relatively newer feature for the last meeting, I think, and was much more specific about under your policy who could participate, and brought that out of the policies and put it right into the notice to make it easier for people to know whether or not they can participate. So I believe Plan A is what the school board is most interested in. Plan B would make you go back to being present at the middle school. And if you could not attend the middle school because of being compromised potentially for health reasons, then phoning in, which would solve the technology problem, but would not allow for the high degree of participation by board members that you can have with the Zoom. So I believe you want, and I'm highly recommending A. So if someone makes the motion for that and approves it with 6 votes, Mr. Asher won't have to read B.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Christy, you're making a motion for which plan?
The one that we.
A.
A.
Okay.
Second.
Butch? For Plan A?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Or any discussion on this, I should say?
I have 3 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Apparently, there's no sunset date on this, so this goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Is that it? It never
Tell
ends?
me when the
There's no
pandemic
sunset
ends.
date on it.
Tell me when the pandemic ends and we can insert it.
That's not appropriate. There's nothing in here that even indicates that there ever will be a sunset date.
I tried that the last time around. We went to green, came back, and then undid that. Things are so uncertain as to, I'm not sure how to even word that, but obviously passage of a bill by the state legislature not permitting this would end it. If there were an end to the pandemic, obviously it would be appropriate for the school board to consider ending this.
I think there should be some statement in there stating that the plan will be in effect until blah, 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 blah. I mean,
I don't know what
or
blah, blah
say
is.
in
That's
here,
the problem.
it's going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Say it, either
I
one.
think that once the pandemic is under control and we can get back to our regular meetings and it's safe for everybody, I think we can then, at that time, come back with another resolution changing it back. But right now, seeing as how everything is up in the air and we don't know whether we're going to go back to yellow or what we're going to do, I think that's what Mr. Patonik's trying to
Hearing something?
say right now, that, you know, we'll do this for now and then later on we can change it back.
It doesn't say that though, Gail. I find that to be very.
May I comment further? And
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I am deeply concerned, and I think this can be borne out, that not every virus has a successful vaccine.
Right.
And there is not 100% guarantee that there will be one in the near future, or for that matter, ever. Although the probability exists because of the huge amount that is being spent on it, that there is a reasonable chance that that might come. But that does not guarantee that everyone will be administered the vaccine, nor does it guarantee how long the vaccine will be effective. There is therefore logically the potential for some form of this virus to continue to circulate. And the reason it is so dangerous, which you all know, but I'm mentioning for the public, is that because it has great ability to be transmitted without persons exhibiting symptoms, thus being a hidden infector and a hidden killer. Thank you.
Second question I have is, what allowance are you making for people who do not have the internet? Sure, they could call in on a phone and they can say something or write a letter, but they can't watch the meeting if they don't have the internet. And that was borne out by our survey in this district that showed hundreds of families that don't have the internet. What allowance is there for them?
Well, as I stated, at
Go
this
ahead, David.
point, it is the ability to phone in. If things get really much better, the potential to go to a public library and use their computer, but not perfect. Under the open meeting law, as it currently exists, the school, any public entity does not have to guarantee absolute perfection of public participation. So we already have the minimum with the phone in. We have the addition of the YouTube, which covers a very high percentage. You have added to it something that is not required at all, written comment. If you want more than that, then it would require probably having physical presence and figuring out when that's going to be.
Right now, I'm looking at a screen and I cannot see two school board members. I see a ceiling of wood and some clouds. What stipulation are you going to make that the person who is voting is visible on the screen at all times if you're going to have these Zoom meetings?
I believe that's a point of order that can be raised by any member at any time.
Put it in the policy.
Doesn't need to be. You can raise it now.
So a ceiling can vote and some clouds can vote.
No.
Yeah.
Any member can say, I can't see member so-and-so. Please direct that they identify themselves.
Visually.
To get back in vision on the screen. That's the purpose of the Zoom.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, we have people participate where they're never there at all. It's a black thing with their name on it. We've had a lot of that.
By board
I
members?
come and sit down here. I come and sit down here.
8.
Not board
I count
members.
8.
Oh, yeah.
I count 8, I can see. So, all right, getting back to the motion, is there any more comments on the motion on the floor? If not, we're ready to move forward with the roll call, Peggy.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Beistel,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Absolutely not. No.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
I can't say it. Implementation of plan for the 2020-2021 school year.
Mrs. Rhodes, before I
Yeah.
read the recommended action, may I make a statement, please?
Sure, please do.
Yeah, I was principal. In my principal capacity, I had a lot of interaction with students as well as their parents. And the main thing that I always wanted all my students and all my parents that I ever interacted with to understand at the end of our conversation was that I cared about their child. I cared about their child. With that being said, I recommend that we follow the AB every other day model for the opening of school. This option allows for classes every other day for students, which is the greatest extent of instruction while providing the safest possible environment for our students. This option also allows for the transition between instructional situations, considering the phase the state may be in, and provides the possibility to move quite easily to a full opening if conditions they permit it. And I think by allowing our parents the opportunity to understand this at this point, it provides them the ability to establish childcare opportunities in preparation for this opening, and also in case conditions may decline and we go into a red phase. I want to reiterate that it is my intention and my purpose. I've agonized over this. I have agonized over this for weeks and possibly months. My moral compass states that I could not recommend any situation that would provide the opportunity to compromise the safety and welfare of any of our students or any of our staff members or faculty members. And that is why I'm recommending the AB educational reopening plan.
Okay, you want to go ahead and read then the
Yes, ma'am.
wording for the motion.
The board authorizes the superintendent and administration to implement a plan for the 2020-2021 school year, subject to any ruling of the Department of Education.
Mr. Masha, do you have to specifically state the plan?
I-
It says plan, a plan.
The AB every other day option plan.
So that's in the resolution.
It is not, but I would, if Dave, I guess you're the better, but would the person, if they were making the recommendation, they would have to include that? Would that be correct, Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Masha, can you use the words a hybrid educational plan, which is a combination of staggered school attendance and virtual learning?
You could.
I would like to make that motion then, that the superintendent and the administration implement a hybrid education plan, commonly referred to as AB, which includes staggered physical attendance in the school facilities, and with alternating cyber education for the 2021 school year, subject to any ruling of the Department of Education.
Well, I don't know if we should use the phrase cyber. I'm going to defer to Mr. Masha to describe that.
I would prefer that we don't use the term cyber. I think distance learning platform is better. Cyber has a connotation that it would be a public cyber school entity, which we really are advocating that our parents not utilize. We really would like our parents to remain in district and utilize the platforms that we are going to be providing. So I would ask that the word cyber not be used in.
Substitute distance learning, then substitute distance learning.
Is that okay, David?
If it's acceptable to Mr. Masha, it is with me.
Okay. Mr. Masha?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Do I need
I'll
a
second by
All right.
Carson.
Okay. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, I think
Good.
so. This is, I think it's important for the public to know that this is the plan that Mr. Mash, it's every other day on a 6-day schedule, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And this is what you think, you and the principals think is the absolute best decision for the students, keeping them safe, but also keeping them seeing their teachers every other day.
At the highest degree possible. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Carson.
In my opinion, I think we need, I feel that I'm not a principal. I'm a parent. I know what my opinion is as a parent. I'm not a teacher. I'm not an administrator. I'm not a principal. And I have to defer to the experts in that area. I can tell you what's best as a parent, but I can't tell you what's best as educationally for the kids. So I'm going to agree with Mr. Masha. If they believe that's the best option, I'm going with that.
Mr. Patonik, you had a question?
Well, I just think for the benefit of the public, because I still don't think this message has been delivered. If you could ask Mr. Masha to explain the great physical difficulties with trying to bring back the entire school district of children physically all at the same time and maintain safe distances designated as 6 feet between the children in the classroom. Because I don't think the message has been received by many parents, and that's why there's so much, I don't know, concern. Because I don't think it's been adequately explained to the public.
How can you say
that? Mr. Clare and Mr. Krofcheck and I went physically down into the rooms and arranged the desks at a 6 foot, which is the recommended social distance spacing. At that recommended spacing, we could get between 14, maximum 16 desks per classroom. We have class sizes that run between 24 to 26 students, depending on the grade level. Some might be lower. There's no possible way we feel we can safely bring those number of students into a classroom, keeping them as safe as possible within the recommended distance of 6 feet. And if, that would necessitate, as Mrs. Raymond had indicated, that if it's less than 6 feet, I know there's a big concern with parents in wearing the facial coverings. That could necessitate students wearing facial coverings. We're trying to minimize the impact on our students, maximize their safety, and maximize the educational opportunities provided to them by doing this.
I think you took the picture down too fast for the public to absorb. Could you please put it up again?
I will post it. I went over and actually took pictures before this meeting. That is what a classroom would look like.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note as well that it's recommended that kids go back to school at the most they can physically be there. Even the American Pediatric Association says that they want them to go back to school. However, if you read further in their report, they're also saying that they want them to go back to school while maintaining 3 to 6 feet of distance, doing away with lockers, not having cafeterias, having kids dropped off by parents. So they are saying go back to school, but they also have a lot of those same restrictions that they're recommending as the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Education is recommending. So I think it's, I think having them there as much as we possibly can while keeping them safe is the best idea.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Masha, you said that you drew up a letter that you are sending out to the public. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you read that letter to us? Maybe that is what Dave Petonic is looking for, an explanation to the public. Can you read it? Is it possible?
I don't have access. I got,
Okay.
I have you
I
on.
was more basic. I was more interested in the physical pictures to get the message across.
It will be posted on the district website tomorrow. I have 2 computers, one with you on it and then one with the board docs.
Or yeah.
I was under the impression that it was a letter to the public explaining Plan A, B, how it would be administered and so forth. Is that what that letter is?
It will be tomorrow. Yes, it will be posted on the website.
Okay, so everybody will know what the plan is tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Michelle, you had a comment?
Yes, I just think that it's important to note to parents, this is my understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but by going back on a 6-day schedule, that allows us that if we get to like the 9-week period and everything is going splendidly and we've had no cases and Westmoreland County is declining, that allows us the greatest possibility to just on a Friday, say Monday, or a week from now, we are jumping right back into classes. And that allows us to continually monitor the situation and be able to jump back into a full-on 5-day week for every single student. This will allow us the great possibility to do that with ease.
That was well articulated, Mrs. Williams. Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Do we have any comments from the other administrators, Dan or anybody else that wants to add anything?
I just want to say thank you for allowing us to work on it and listen to all the ideas and be part of it. None of these choices are easy ones, and we're all tasked with a difficult job here. So I'm personally grateful for the feedback and the advice and sometimes even the criticism that forces you to rethink and really try to be as confident as you can be in very unsure times to try to have a good plan. I'm very appreciative of that. So thank you to everybody who's on this group to be part of this process. It's not an easy one.
Thank you, Mr. Clara. Anybody else? Mr. Krofcheck, any comments?
Mrs. Rhodes, I would also just, if I could add that, Ms. Alex Novikov, I don't know if I'm visible, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, we can see you.
Our most recent survey did ask parents explicitly if they would send their students. And nearly 80%, I think 78 point something or 79% of parents indicated they would send their students back. Just so I think the community knows, our average class size in an elementary 2nd through 5th grade is 26 students per class. 80% of those students would be greater than 20. In secondary, many of our classes are greater than 30 students. So even at 80% capacity, that picture that Mr. Masha showed should truly illuminate how it would be disingenuous for us to use phrases like, well, we'll separate as best we can and put 25 7th graders into an English class. So the survey was heard, and that is some data that was also used in making this decision, because if greater than 80% of our families send students back, it would be absolutely physically impossible to even keep kids 3 feet apart, let alone 6 feet apart.
Bringing up the 80%, I do think it would be important after we make this decision to budget-wise figure out what the other 20% are doing, so that we can plan budget wise what we're looking at, because that's 350 and more kids that potentially aren't going to be in the district. So I think it would be important for us to figure out where they're going to be, if they're going to be homeschooled, if they're going to be in our SOLA, if whatever's happening. I think it would be important to figure that out as soon as possible.
I'm optimistic, Ms. Smith, that one, I think that a lot of that 20% was, I have a daughter in the district, and so I have some personal stake in this too. And I know for a fact that a lot of that 20% were parents who maybe would feel comfortable knowing that only 14, 13 kids were in a room as opposed to 26 kids. So I'm hoping that number's different. The task force that I'm working with for in student services and instruction, we're really, Mr. Clare did a great job budgeting some federal funding for professional learning. And we have some ideas that task force is going to work on to keep a continuity of education for our students, so they're directly connected to our teachers and our curriculum, because something we haven't talked enough about countywide, statewide, is this is really seen as a pendulum of you're in cyber or you're in class. And we know that there are 2-week quarantine issues families might incur. And if a student goes to a hotspot and comes back in September and they want to be in our AB model, we're not going to just push them out to cyber. We need to be able to offer them that continuity of access to our curriculum and our teachers. And it's a huge challenge. We have amazing teachers who, just like everyone across the country, are going to be tasked with something that no one's ever done before. But that was a big consideration too, was to make sure that we had a platform that could go weave in and out for a kid who may just, he went to a funeral in a hotspot state and came back, and the family said, we'll self-quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, we don't want to send packets. We want that student to have access. I think we have some strong starter ideas, and we have a really strong task force that I think is going to be able to flush those out and keep reporting back to the community.
Can I say something?
Sure. Thank you, Alex.
When you conduct a survey, you cannot assume that the people who did not answer have a response. So what the administration did that was smart is they counted 100% of the kids coming back and split that number. And that's how you do it, because you don't know what those other 350 responses are. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be there. So by utilizing the total numbers, the administration did the right thing. And my second question is, are compulsory attendance laws, truancy and so forth, are they still in effect?
Yes. Students, if they go to the cyber module, they're still going to be required to attend school. And there's going to be some flexibility and leeway depending upon the circumstances of an individual family. So that also needs to be further explored, Dr. Spike. In total honesty, there could be a situation where somebody, due to health concerns, might be placed in a special circumstance that we'll have to address.
Mr.
My concern, Mr. Mesha, is that somebody could use quarantine, 14-day quarantine, 10 times in a row.
Yeah, we're concerned about that.
I am concerned about what happened.
Yes.
I hope they don't do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm working with my task force's health and safety, working with nurses and guidance counselors. We are talking about some of those questions, and we're looking at what we can get from, first of all, the state, CDC, WHO, as far as what happens if, right, and trying to build for ourselves kind of like a structure of how to respond to those things, because it's something that doesn't exist. So,
right.
We're kind of learning how to do that as we go, but that is part of our discussion. Mr. Carson's part of my team. Thank you for helping with that. So those are questions that are coming up. So I may not have an answer for you tonight on that, Dr. Fike, but I can tell you we're talking about it already. Those are questions that for the first time we're going to have to figure out how to respond to. Somebody who's abusing the system or somebody who's really not well, and we want to make sure that they are connected to us and need to be home. How do we respond? So.
Dan, there is a way though that you can measure or document whether or not a kid logs on the off day. You can
Yes.
document
Oh, yes.
that, right? that a
Oh,
kid
yes.
either is or isn't on that lesson.
Absolutely.
I think we have to do some good record keeping too.
One good thing about technology is it helps us to do some of that automatically. So that's an area we'll have kind of a leg up, but still procedurally, policy wise, we have some things to iron out, and we are talking about them.
Thank you.
Gail, there's one thing I'd like to say.
Yes.
All right. I want to commend all the committees, all our superintendents, principals for the job well done through this crisis, which nobody ever faced in this world before as a superintendent, educator, or whatever. I want to applaud them for what they come up with, how they did it, and how they're concerned about our students and education. So thank you. Good night, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Beistel.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. I second what Mr. Beistel said. All right. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? All right. Hearing no more comments, we're going to go ahead and have roll call, please.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Athletic plan.
The board is asked to approve the district's revised athletic reopening plan, which is going to be, I want to address it, it's going to be a fluid process because as situations change, we're going to have to keep revising it, but we revised it and it'll probably end up being revised again.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a motion?
I have to ask a question before I can make a motion.
Okay. Usually do that after, but okay, go ahead.
Okay, I can wait.
I'll make the motion.
All right, Mr. Carson, second.
Second. Beistel.
Okay, Christie, go ahead.
So we had talked at the last meeting that we do not want phase 2 to begin until the school board approves it, and that we don't want anyone in the building until it's approved. It still says in this packet that phase 2 should start now-ish. Are we still saying that? We don't want anyone in the building and we want phase 1 to continue? Sorry.
I would think that under the circumstances of certainty, we should continue in phase 1.
And keep the building closed? Is that what you're still recommending?
I at this juncture in time, I think there's just too many uncertainties. It would be my personal view to keep the building closed and remain in phase 1. I don't know if Mr. Krofcheck would have any additional comments to that, but
I echo that sentiment. I think we should continue phase 1 until we get closer to the official start date of the athletic seasons, which is typically the second August 10th, somewhere around that time.
I have a question for Mr. Krofcheck. Can you please tell me if I've been misinformed, but I was told that the entire band was inside the high school Tuesday night when the rain came. The entire band was in the high school Tuesday during the rainstorm. Is that true or not? Because I'm misinformed.
I'd have to look into that.
There was lightning, though. I don't think we can expect anybody to stay outside in the lightning. I mean, I would be concerned for their safety that way too. So, I mean, not everybody would have had a car to go sit in.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying that the building now has to start all over again. We have to start back on square one, if that was the case. The building has not been sealed for the appropriate time as recommended by CDC.
The CDC recommends 7 days, and 7 days would have been up last week. Right? She was in the building on Tuesday, two weeks ago Tuesday, right?
Yeah, that time
No,
passed.
day before yesterday.
What was that? I'm sorry, Dr. Fike.
The day before yesterday, they were in there.
Right, so that would have been a week after the week was up.
So do we start all over again? That's my question, Michelle. Do we start all over?
Well, technically, I guess you could say that, but we don't have a positive case. Like we were going by, there was a positive case in the building. So at this point, we have to suspect that there were no positive cases unless we would get a phone call then, of course, and then the building should be sealed up again. That would be my understanding of knowing there was possible contact in the school. So I just had a question about the masks.
Okay.
Going back to Christie's statement about if we're going to say that we're not going to allow anybody in the building till August 10th, and that's when we'll go to phase 2, does that need to be reflected in this plan? Because I think the dates are still the old dates. Do we need to change that?
If the board would make that motion, yes, we could revise that. If you would please make that part of the motion.
Okay.
Okay, and then I had a question on the masks, just because I think this will ultimately, I think this whole thing will ultimately, eventually change. But where it says in here that students must wear face coverings when entering and exiting practice venues, I thought that the mandatory mask policy said that they had to wear them if they were on the sidelines, if they were in the dugouts, anytime they weren't able to be 6 feet apart. I thought that's what so I don't know if that needs to be part of when we resubmit this, if it should literally say that in here. Like I'm just questioning that portion. If we're fixing the dates, that might be something we need to say.
This changes, so for it's going to change.
I know.
We can make all those changes if they were part. Yeah, if that was part of the motion.
I think that is what the PDE sent us. We got from the PSBA that it has to be masks if you're not playing and if you're within 6 feet of someone. So in the dugouts, on the sidelines, when you're huddling, blah, blah, blah. And coaches, same thing, have to have masks on all the time, as far as
Let me ask, and maybe Mr. Botanic, you can chime in on this. Would it be beneficial on a practical sense to put language in our athletic plan that reflects something along the lines of based on the most current PIAA recommendations? Because I get a recommendation and I get updates from the PIAA, and that was the most recent that Mrs. Williams had referenced to. That way, kind of is fluid with whatever the PIAA recommendations are, and we're not going in every month and saying, okay, this piece has changed. Is there kind of a catch-all based on the most recent PIAA recommendations? Is that legally possible? Is that too ambiguous, David?
Well, I'm not sure if I want to give carte blanche to the PIAA. So I don't know if it's possible because that the PIAA and the governor could have a disagreement, but I don't want the school district caught in that dilemma. So I would think that it's better that these things come back to the school board for changes. Because there's too many things going on with the legislature fighting with the governor, and I would want to think that the PIAA would be doing everything according to the book, but my job is to be protective of the school board and our residents So I'm going to err on the side of caution and say I don't agree with that concept. I'm sorry.
So do we need a new motion? Or does the old one work?
Well, you've inserted into it masks staying 6 feet apart. I don't think anyone yet inserted what Mr. Krofcheck was recommending based on most current PIAA recommendations. I think maybe a better phrase would be based on most current understanding of law and medical understanding, something like that.
And we should add about the August 10th date.
Yes.
Should we, so August 10th, they would move to phase 2? Is that what you're saying?
I think that would be a tenet, but I think that needs to be reassessed during the conditions too.
So should we just say they can move to phase 2 upon board approval?
That would be wonderful.
And
Can do
that phase 1 now includes no one in the building? Because I think
The
right now.
building you're referring to, is it just a high school or is it any building?
I think it's going to have to be any building because we're going to have possibility of, I don't know, cheerleaders or someone being at other buildings.
Yeah, I think before we said no one in any of the like for meetings for school board. I mean, we just voted on the school board that we can't be in the building. So I'm kind of thinking it applies to every building, every one.
I was going to add, and I don't have the plan up in front of me right directly. Phase 2 is not just about inside, outside. I think maybe we should re-examine what we mean between phase 1 and phase 2, because phase 2 does allow for a little bit more activity to occur just as an athletic program, still within the guidelines of monitoring contact. I think if we're worried about inside outside, maybe we should specify that, not hamstringing what you can do in phase 2 simply if it's an inside outside issue. That's my only concern about waiting so long on phase 2, even though I agree maybe my earlier comment about moving to phase 2 was less about the other activities. Phase 2 is maybe it should be more targeted on, okay, let's try to stay outside as long as we can and not just capriciously go inside for whatever reason, because that creates potential more problems. But let's not hamstring the other things that coaches and teams could do in phase 2. That maybe we should get some input from the coaches as to how we should reshape that so that it's not just a blanket, we're going to start phase 2 August 10th.
Madam President?
Yes.
There's still a lot of moving parts with everything with this. Is there any plan to have a special meeting at the end of July so that you don't get so far into August that there's too much catch up to do?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Probably the last week in August.
July.
I mean, July.
I'm sorry, July. I was thinking of that August 10th thing.
Yeah. So that's before August 10th, and that's one of the advantages.
Yes, definitely.
So if we just continue with the buildings closed, the only difference I really see, Mr. Krofcheck, is the amount of kids or the amount of people, and that it's a little more team practice than individual practices. But
I guess I don't want to. My caution is I would maybe like to consult with my coaches to say, okay, if we stay outside, what can we do within phase 2, or what should we alter as opposed to like a carte blanche, let's wait on phase 2? Because I also don't want to hamstring a team that is safely monitoring and safely distancing outside if we just say all of phase 2 doesn't start until a certain date. And I'm not a member of the board, obviously, but if I can kind of petition my coaches to say, can we look at this because they're the ones on the front lines? What could we live with? How could we move forward with something appropriate for phase 2? still maintaining that we don't want anybody else in the building. And I do want to add, because I'm kind of getting feedback from the comment regarding the band. There was a storm on Tuesday night, and by all means, if there's lightning, I want those kids in a safe place. So I'm pretty confident that they probably kept them distanced and were not in there practicing as much as they were keeping them safe. So if that's possible, I can reach out to my coaches if that's acceptable to the board.
Yeah, I think if we just move along, that it is what it is right now, just nobody in the building as much as possible. Obviously, we expect coaches to use reasonable common sense, and if it's lightning out, I would be upset if they didn't take the kids inside. So, you know, like Mr. Masha said, this is so fluid, and you have to use your best judgment, and the kids' safety is the best, and you know, there's going to be times where you're going to have to go inside, and coaches should be able to make that decision if it's an emergency like.
Right.
They are allowed to use the field house though, correct? I mean, obviously we have to be using bathrooms somewhere.
Yeah, they have to use the restrooms.
So we are using the field house and not the high school though.
Yeah, restroom facilities.
Thank you.
Okay, so are we revising this motion?
Mr.
So-
Masha. Mr.
Yeah,
Masha,
go ahead.
Is
Go
this athletic plan on here tonight the same one that was on there previously that we approved? What changes are on this one?
There was about masks.
Okay.
It's at the very end, Mr. Polakowski.
Okay.
Like the very, very, very last couple pages, it brings in masks.
All right.
But
Because
I'm
it just
not
looks
sure
very
it's-
similar to the other one.
It is. It's really similar. I just don't know if what it says about masks is currently what the PDE is telling us to say about masks to resubmit it.
Okay.
Can we just wait and table it? Does anything change if we just say, keep doing what you're doing? And Mr. Kravchuk can talk to his coaches?
Well, how quickly does the PD say this needs to be resubmitted though to reflect the mandatory mask statement? That's my only concern. Like, I understand waiting on all the other things, but like I don't want them to not be able to practice because we didn't send something to the PDE saying we were using masks.
I would like to submit it with a statement about masks.
Can we just change in there? I think this article that I just pulled up said that they need to be wearing masks unless they're actively engaged. If they're, I think that's what it says. Let me pull back up because maybe I have my wording wrong. Yes. Athletes, PIAA confirms athletes are not required to wear face masks while actively engaged in summer workouts.
So do we want to add that to the motion on the floor? It would have to be Mr. Carson and Mr. Beistel would have to sign off on that.
That's fine, whatever the board wants to do.
Okay, Mr. Carson, you made the motion, so what's your opinion?
Yeah, if we need to reword it, or, yeah, I mean, we can redo it.
Okay. So how would it read then? That it would include the mask and how else do you want to say that?
That's safety for our students and athletes.
Can Mrs. Williams read that statement again if she had it?
Yeah. Do you have that statement, Mrs. Williams?
Yes, it says that the PI, it just says that they, wait 1 second, now I have my kennel going here. Athletes are not required to wear face masks while actively engaged.
Okay.
So, I guess we just say that unless an athlete is actively engaged, they need to be wearing a face mask.
And coaches all the time.
Yes. Yeah, it does say that in here, that
Yeah.
coaches are to wear them.
Okay. Can we move ahead with that, David?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, one thing though. Are the coaches allowed to wear shields? Is that considered a mask as well in that, or do we need to mention that?
We're looking to provide shields for our teaching staff.
I'm sure some of these coaches would probably rather have shields on if it's acceptable. But I just want to, throw it out there in case it comes up.
You mean as an alternative if they bring
Yes.
their own mask or what?
No, shield. I've seen a lot of people going with shields.
I mean their own shield. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, right. So we consider that to be.
Both. Honestly, I thought you had to
It's
do
both. Okay.
That's what I could very well be wrong.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we need to mention it or not, but that's fine as long as we assume that it's the same.
Okay. Any other comment? All right, we'll call for roll call now.
Mr. Carson? Mr.
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Since I've been told that I'm too uninformed to make any judgment on athletics, I'll have to pass.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Of course, yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 pass, 1 absent.
Employee pay claim.
David, I'm turning that one over to you.
Well, I think the board has to make a decision as to whether or not it wants to entertain a motion to amend the agenda to consider the pay claim as a procedural first vote, and then to take up the substance of it.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Or is this going to require additional executive session and it's not ready to happen tonight? That's really what I'm asking.
Is this about what we talked about in executive session? Because I'm not sure what this is about.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Whether to settle or not settle.
Actually, whether or not you're going to vote on the substantive is my first question.
Yes. So you needed a motion to, what was that,
Amend the
Dave?
agenda to
Amend
it's a motion,
agenda, yeah.
motion to amend the agenda to consider the wage claim of the employee.
Okay, do I have a motion?
State the amount.
I can't hear you at all.
State the amount.
Well, you're not voting on the substance of it, so I don't know what amount you want to go with.
Well, then why are we?
We're just voting to see if we want to amend the agenda.
To consider this, or if it's going to be further considered in executive session, because I don't know.
I'll vote to amend the agenda.
I give up.
Okay, and I'll need a second.
Carson will second.
Okay, now what, David?
Take a voice vote. I'm sorry. Wait a minute, hold it. Because this wasn't publicly done, I'm going to ask for a vote of 6 people. to approve, just considering it. To ultimately pass it would not.
Okay. So you want me to have Peggy take,
Will you read this motion to me, please? Read the motion to me.
It's a motion to amend the agenda to consider a pay claim. If you consider the pay claim, then you read the motion.
My agenda has it on there. Employee pay claim. What do you mean? What are we amending this agenda? It says employee pay
Because
claim.
the substance of it was not put out to the public yet, because you had not yet discussed it in executive session.
That's a different motion. Okay.
So it's two
Okay.
different things that are happening. First is procedural.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's two
okay,
things.
so as far as the procedural, do you need a roll call on that, David?
Well, I'm not sure how else you find out if you got 6 votes, but.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying, how else are we going to find out?
Yes.
All right, Peggy, can you have a roll call, please, on this?
Dr. Fike?
I think we've talked about it enough. No.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
Okay.
Superintendent, I'll read the public motion.
What's the motion, David? You asked me to use it as a placeholder. So where's the motion?
Don't you have it under executive content?
No, you did not provide that.
Go back to executive session.
Okay.
Resolution.
Resolve that Southmoreland School Board accepts or does not accept the offer of settlement by attorney Charles Steele on behalf of employee Lee Miswall to settle his wage claim against this school district for $15,291.74, which includes $1,188.72 projected extra sewage plant trips, less any days not worked between now and August 31st, 2020, and not otherwise eligible, be compensated as vacation day, sick day, or personal day, if any, to be deducted from his separation monies owed under the Act 93 plan as a compromise of a disputed claim conditioned upon the employee executing a full and final release of all claims against the district concerning wages, compensation, discrimination, statutory, contractual rights, and rights under Act 93 and plans adopted thereunder, except compensation and benefits which may otherwise be eligible pursuant to the retirement incentive plan for Southmoreland School District administrators, members of management team in existence at the time of retirement in the form acceptable to the solicitor.
I need a motion.
And indicate whether you're accepting or not accepting.
Yes. A motion to accept or reject.
I make the motion to accept, Carson.
I second the motion.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
No.
Mrs. Williams?
No.
Mr. Beistel?
No.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
5 yes, 3 no, 1 absent. Doesn't pass, or does it?
Yes. Yes.
It says requires 6 affirmative at the bottom of his motion.
That was a error that was transposed over from the resolutions for the motions to suspend, but it did apply to the motion to take this under consideration. I apologize for not calling attention to have stricken that before you started to vote, but
Okay.
it's a
So
standard. It's a standard. Once you pass the procedural hurdle of getting it onto the agenda tonight in its complete form, then you go to the regular school code provision for 5 affirmative votes.
Okay, I was just looking at the papers there.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
That's all right. What passed then?
Varsity tennis coach resignation.
Board is asked to accept the resignation of James Kessler as the varsity tennis coach effective June 15th, 2020, and authorize administration to post the position. And I think we've been following the process. Was there a statement that, oh no, it's the post position, I'm sorry.
Okay, I need a motion.
Motion, Beistel.
Second.
I'll second Michelle Williams.
Any discussion?
Mr. Masha, is that for boys and girls or one or the other or all of them?
Mr. Krofcheck, which one does he coach?
He coaches both of them.
Both.
Both.
Hmm.
So he's resigning both positions?
That should be stated.
Yeah, that's true. Butch, are you all right to add that it is the both boys and girls varsity tennis coach position?
Yes, as long as that's what it's supposed to be.
Okay. And Michelle, do you second that
Yes.
still? Okay,
Yes.
all right. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Please be on.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Motion carries. 8-1.
Madam President,
Yes.
will you be calling for a motion to authorize and direct the secretary to advertise for a public special meeting for general business purposes for July 30th, the Thursday at 7 p.m.?
I will not be there, just so we're clear on that. I won't be able to be present for that. I work. It's the only Thursday all month that I work.
I'm not available that day either.
Or any other day that is acceptable to the school board.
Okay, what other day that week would that work, or is that a bad week?
Catherine, did you say you were out of town that week?
I said, good news, I'll be in Seattle.
Oh, well, I don't know. Is that good news for you? For us?
I'm gonna go see Chaz and Chop. I'm gonna go see it.
Can we do the Thursday before? Or a different Thursday?
What week are we talking about?
We were talking about the last week in July. If we do it that Thursday,
I'm good any of those days.
you are?
Yeah, I'm good any day.
Can you do it the day before, Gary?
We could. How would the 29th be?
I don't work the 28th. That's it.
So you would be available, would you be available on the 29th?
Me? No.
Yes. No? Okay, Christy?
It's only available the 28th, she said.
Oh, okay.
I'm available the Thursdays before. I know Mr. Masha's away.
Yeah. Well, would the 28th work? Is everybody going to be able to be here on the 28th? Anybody not going to be able to be here?
Catherine is away. Catherine's away.
Oh,
Go ahead and have it. Go ahead and have it. Whatever you want to, it doesn't matter.
You can take your, no, I guess not.
mm-mm.
I guess
No,
not.
I
Mr. Masha, are you available on the 23rd?
I can make myself available. I won't have the ability to work on board docs before that. I would be really dependent on Mrs. Tarzan.
Are you available, Catherine, that week before?
Yes. 23rd, yeah.
So is that when the report from the coaches is to come back also?
That would be 2 weeks. Don't you think that would be plenty of time for that to occur?
That's a question for Mr. Krofcheck.
Okay. Mr. Krofcheck, would that give you enough time?
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to them within the next day or two.
Okay. The 23rd, Mr. Masha, how would that, do you think that that would be okay?
I will try to make it. The only thing that I would ask the board to consider is we have first round interviews tomorrow for Mr. Miswall's replacement. And we're hoping to have a second round with the with personnel committee on the board. So I mean, I'd like to try to get that done before that meeting, have a recommendation if possible.
Is
Yeah,
that
so
adequate time?
What's that, Mr. Koenig?
Is that adequate time? Because that's obviously one of the main reasons for this meeting.
We're interviewing tomorrow, so I would have to be dependent on probably Mr. Krofcheck or another administrative member, Mr. Clara, to help out organizing that.
Would that be something we'd be able to do, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
No, that's just, I wanted to make sure there's enough time to go through the process of vetting those candidates.
So we would have to do something the week of the 13th in that committee. Let me see. I'd have to look and see who's on that committee.
Christie's on that, I know.
That would be Christy, Jim, and myself would be on that personnel committee. So we would have to try to set something up.
I lost. I didn't hear what she said. We'd have to try to set something up.
Yeah, she froze.
Oh. Do you know what she was going to say?
Nope.
Okay.
I can only guess what I'm going to say sometime.
16th, we have Act 93, right?
Yes, the 16th is Act 93.
Okay. So we would have to do something Monday or Wednesday. We could do it Tuesday, but it'd have to be later in the day for me. So Is that something we want to think about and then get back to, we could get back, I can call you guys and we can try to set something up?
Yeah. I'm sure we
Okay.
can put something in.
Yeah, let's do that. So do we want to go ahead and go with the 23rd then?
Yes.
Yeah, yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay, good.
Can you take a quick roll call vote?
Yeah, Peggy, can you hurry up and just do a real quick one for the 23rd?
Public special voting meeting for general purposes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith? Who made the motion? I don't have a
Well,
motion.
I think it's just to make sure that we have, everybody's going to be able to do one on 23rd.
No, this is
Okay.
actually to approve it.
Oh, okay.
Did someone make the motion?
I'll make a motion that we have a meeting for, a special voting meeting for general
Business purposes.
business purposes.
Okay, second.
I'll second if no one else did.
Okay. Now roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
I think I know what I'm voting on. My thing went out, but I'll say yes. I think it's about the meeting. So yes, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 no, 1 absent. I'm getting a message for public comment. When you're ready, I have a gentleman waiting.
Mr.
Okay.
Nash, walk something on.
I was just going to say, were there some things you wanted to walk on, Mr. Mash? Go ahead.
Yes, I have two items that I definitely would like to walk on. Can I make a motion that the board accept the posting of the secondary school, high school English teacher position?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Is that Mr. Beistel, the second?
Yes.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Mrs. Rhodes, I have one other.
Go ahead.
I would ask the board to accept the placement of Patty DiBiasio as the first grade teacher at SPC and authorize the administration to post the K-1 intervention specialist position.
I'll make that motion.
Second, Beistel.
Any discussion?
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1, absent.
Thank you,
Is that all
Madam.
you have, Mr. Masher?
Yeah, I don't know if we had certainty on the other item.
Okay.
I'll provide additional information.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go ahead and Have the public comment?
Hello, oh, they're connecting.
Okay.
This gentleman's name is Travis Henry. Mr. Henry, if you can hear us, okay, go.
Oh, hi there. I had to unmute.
Go ahead, sir.
You guys can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a couple questions. I wanted to know if transportation has been talked about, like kids riding the bus. I didn't know if there's measures to keep that distanced, or, anything's been decided with that yet. And also if there will be literature sent out to the parents, like, the 20 roughly 20% or so that aren't comfortable sending their kids to school yet. I know in our circumstance, like, I have a pre-existing condition, and I just wanted to know, like, the ins and outs of that. And I don't expect you to have all those answers right now, but if you have some sort of date or just a rough estimate when we should expect some sort of literature in the mail about that.
That'll be coming in the very near future.
About everything, the transportation as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to ask. The next board meeting is next month, correct?
No,
There's another one this month?
the board just voted to set a special voting meeting for general business purposes. And I've already forgotten the date. I think it's the 23rd.
23rd.
The 23rd. Okay. I'm curious with the meetings, I think it's only eight weeks or so until the first day of school. If I know everybody, the vote, I will just watch the whole thing tonight, but with the vote, to send kids back in and everything, if the numbers get worse, or if Westmoreland goes back, like everything's red in 8 weeks, will there be another vote, or is this what we can look forward to plan on?
Well, it's subject to further changes in law by the legislature, acts by the governor to the extent that he would still have the authority to do so, and some independent authority that the Secretary of Health has, and through that, then the Secretary of Education. So if the pandemic were to worsen, there is potential for more restrictive teaching.
May I say something, please? Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Christy Smith. I think it's important to clarify that Mr. Masha mentioned earlier that this plan is very changeable and flexible. Right. So if things get worse, which truthfully I expect to happen, then he can move to all virtual. If things, I hope, would get better, then he can move back to full time. But I think that's why he wanted to pick this half and half, so that we're planning for both scenarios and we can take things as they come, because it seems to change every single day.
Yeah. And that's why I asked if this was set in stone, or if this could potentially change, just for parents planning ahead, whatever. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Masha, there was to be a task force meeting on Monday, I believe, that was publicized on the website that had the different task force dates. I think that has been canceled, if I'm correct. I just wanted to, if that's true, I think we should say it publicly because I know there are people planning on coming.
Mr. Clara,
I think it was a full task force, like everyone. It was open to the public.
Mr. Matt, is that okay? Ms. Rhodes, if I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I see you.
Sorry, I turned my overhead light there. Yeah, so Ms. Smith, that was in the original plan. And then of course, you know, as we tabled and did more surveys, so our task force were slightly delayed, though they're all up and running right now. I believe Mr. Claire and I and the admin team, Mr. Krofcheck, Ms. Kuhar, Mr. Haichu, and Mr. Masher discussed doing that week of this new meeting in July. Is that the plan, Mr. Clara? So yeah,
Yes.
we'd like to do a public forum, which would take place obviously via this same platform, the same day, just before the board meeting to update on the task force and the current action plan. But that's why the delay is occurring.
We wanted to, since we didn't know what our strategy was going to be, we kind of had to wait a little while till we had all that data collected and presented tonight. So we'd like a little bit of time to be able to report what we've done since we got the green light to begin that work.
Okay, I just know there was a lot of public interest in people coming, so I wanted to make sure it was put out there tonight that it's not.
Thank you for reminding us. Yes.
And I do believe we have to emphasize that that is going to be a Zoom, correct? Mr. Claire, that's a Zoom platform?
Yes.
And explain everything.
Yeah, we'll put something on the website indicating that it's been canceled.
45 minutes just on this one.
Okay, go ahead.
I said we'll put something on the website indicating that it's been canceled so we don't have everybody showing up.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? If not, I'll need a motion for adjournment.
Carson will make the motion.
I will second that.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody. Stay cool.
Right.
Thank you.
And everything is in place. And I said on there, I give